Katie and welcome back to my booktube channel. Today's video is my January wrap-up and it's actually January 27th, so obviously there are a few days left in the month, but I'm going wedding dress shopping. It's my first appointment and I'm super excited, but I will be busy with that, so I won't have time to film this later than today. So I might read another book or two, probably not, but if I do, it will be on my Goodreads, which is linked below. It just won't be in this video. But in January, as of now, I have read 17 books and a little less than 6,000 pages. So it was a slower reading month for me, but I tried to dive a little deeper into the books I was reading and slow down my pace because I wanted to be affected more by the books I was reading instead of trying to achieve a number. And I think I was successful this month. I found a lot of books I really enjoyed. I reread some of my favorite books, and I also read some ebooks that weren't my favorite, but we'll get to that in a second. I made my own reading journal for this year, and in this journal I ended up doing a spread where I have like my top 5 books of the month and my bottom 5 books of the month. So at the end of this I will tell you what books made those little tiers. But the first book I read in January and all of 2022 was The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I already did a spoiler-free review for this book. I absolutely am obsessed with it. I love it so much. The companion novel, Terms and Conditions, is coming out in March, I want to say. Super soon. And I cannot wait to get my hands on that. But I tabbed so much of this book, and here's like all the tabs for my favorite scenes. It's so good. It basically takes place in Dreamland, which is kind of like this world's Disney World, and it's grumpy sunshine. It's a workplace romance. It's a billionaire romance. It has so many amazing tropes, and the fact that all those tropes combine in such a fun setting like Dreamland, and it has spice, what more could you want? I gave this book 5 stars. I love Zara and Rowan, and if you haven't read this already, please go pick it up. I adore this book. Then I ended up reading Frozen Feelings by Arabelle Red Fox, and this was something I came across on Book Talk, and it had just come out, and so I wanted to give it a chance. It was only 55 pages, so I really tried to go in with low expectations because typically I don't enjoy a novella as much as I enjoy a full-length book, but I did not like a single thing about this book. And I feel horrible saying that because it doesn't have a lot of reviews or like ratings, and I ended up giving this 1 star. I actually didn't even leave a review because I felt kind of bad. So this is my review, but I did not like it. The plot made absolutely no sense. Basically, it was like this girl is going to a work Christmas party with her fiance or boyfriend, something like that, and he treats her like crap and ends up tripping her into this fountain and embarrassing her in front of everybody at the party. So she runs away and ends up bumping into the 2 brothers that own the company that her boyfriend works for, and they have some fun. And that's literally the entire plot of the book. It's given away by the summary, so it's not even really a spoiler because it already says that in the summary. And it's written very poorly, in my opinion. It's not edited well. And also, I think our characters are supposed to have an accent, but it wasn't done in like a fun way or like a way that's easy to understand. It was just very confusing. Even the spice, which I thought would save it, was confusing for me, and it did not work for me. So I gave this 1 star. There were literally parts of this book that I laughed at because I couldn't believe it was written. And once again, I feel really bad saying that, so hopefully the author does not watch this video. But yeah, 1 star. Then I ended up reading an arc of Lucky Leap Day by Anne-Marie Walker, and this came out January 18th, so it's already out for you guys. But basically, in Ireland, there is this tradition where on Leap Day, every 4 years, women are able to propose to the men, and I can't remember. There's something that's supposed to happen if the men turn them down. I really can't remember, but it's like this really fun tradition, and Our main character is in Ireland, I think for vacation or something. Like, she was supposed to go with her ex-boyfriend. He dumped her, and she decided to go anyway. And while she's there, the story starts with her waking up in a hotel room with a complete stranger and a tinfoil ring on her finger. And that's basically all you really know going in. But this book takes place in Ireland and also in LA. And it's pretty cute. I thought the romance was adorable. I really liked the Irish setting. I feel like once it moved to LA, it was a little bit less fun for me. But it was a pretty cute book. It was a very quick, easy read, and I had a lot of fun reading it, honestly. It was also pretty funny. Some of the scenes were a little bit far-fetched, but in a fun way, so as long as you keep an open mind, I think you'll be fine. Also, I love the epilogue. It's really creative, and it caught me off guard, and I had a great time with it. Oh, I gave this book 4 stars. Then I ended up moving on to Dirty Dom by Willow Winters, and that is the first book in a Mafia series. And these are really small books, actually. This is the Discreet series, so she basically took all of her books and gave them all discreet covers, and instead of putting the title on the front or blurbs on the back, she just made it discreet and just left the character names on it, so you would still know what story it's from, but nobody else would know what the book's about, which I love. If you flip a couple pages in, it does have the actual title and the synopsis, but it's really fun. My copy is signed. My fiance bought me this whole series for Christmas, and I had a great time with this. These are definitely like dark romances, and basically this is about a girl who is trying to pay off her late husband's debt, and so she goes to pay off this debt and meets with the bookie, and things get spicy pretty fast. This also has, I think, the primal kink, if that's something you're interested in. It definitely caught me off guard. It starts with the spice right away, like even in the prologue. So that caught me off guard, but once I got used to it, I did have a fun time reading this. I struggle with shorter books like this because I feel like you don't get to know the characters as well as I typically would like to. So I couldn't give this any more than 3 stars. But that's more of a personal preference. If you're somebody that enjoys reading books just for the smut, I feel like this is a really great book. I did enjoy the spice. I just wish I was able to dig into the characters a little bit more, although I was more connected to them than I expected to be, and they did have more character development than I expected, which is a plus. After that, I finally read The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. I actually read like the first 70 pages last year, put it down for some reason, and didn't pick it up again until this month. But I ended up skimming through those 70 pages and then finishing this book, and I loved it. I had a great time. I feel like any art for this book would be stunning. Like the world I imagined in my head, absolutely gorgeous. I loved the world building. I really enjoyed the character dynamic. I don't know. It just felt like such an interesting plot to me, and maybe that's because I hadn't read fantasy in such a long time. This was the first fantasy that I picked up this year, and I'm really glad that it kind of got me back into the genre because it had been a few months since I picked up a fantasy book. Basically, Laura is sent to marry the king of the enemy kingdom, and she is sent there with one goal, which is to bring his kingdom to its knees, and she's supposed to go there and spy on him and the whole kingdom and figure out a way for her people to get in and attack. And while she's there, she ends up learning more about the world and trying to figure out who's telling her the truth. She's very conflicted, and you also get romance in here, which I really enjoyed. This book is also slower paced than I anticipated, but it did have some action scenes, so I still really liked it. I feel like the slower pace worked really well for the atmosphere that was created through the world building, and I had such a great time reading more and more about the world that I didn't really mind the slow pace. The only thing I did not like about this book was that I feel like the transition between enemies to lovers or, them hating each other, not trusting each other, to them having like bonded. I feel like it was way too fast. It had a lot of potential, but I just feel like it moved too fast, which sometimes does happen in smaller books like this. I guess it's not that small. It's like 300 something pages, but I think this is just the first book in a duology, so I could see why it moved a little fast. I just wish it moved slower because I feel like it would have hit a lot harder. I gave this 4 stars. After that, I moved on to Make Me Lie by C.R. Jane, and I read this on my Kindle. It is a college bully romance. It is a reverse harem, and it deals with our main character, who is the daughter of a serial killer. And those 3 little tidbits were all I needed to draw me into this book. Something I really enjoyed is that each of the guys were very different, and it was pretty easy to keep track of them all and remember who was who. I've read reverse harems before where I had a really hard time keeping them straight, so I really appreciated that they all had very different personalities. There also was some pretty good spice in here, which makes me more excited for the next book in the series. I don't think it was as spicy as I was anticipating, but I feel like I appreciate it starting slow, and I'm hoping that in each book in the series, it gets a little spicier. Some of these scenes were pretty unrealistic, but I think it was done in a really fun way, so as long as you keep an open mind, you'll have a great time with this book. Also, there are some dream nightmare sequences, which I think were really well done, and I've realized that I don't really read a lot of books where characters have dreams or nightmares, so I really enjoyed that element. Definitely check trigger warnings before reading this. Check trigger warnings for most of these books, especially Dirty Dom and this one, because they definitely have some stuff going on that if you're not prepared for, I think it might be an issue. So please check trigger warnings. After that, I couldn't help myself and I had to reread It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This was my favorite romance of 2021 and it was just calling out to me again. So I had to reread it and I love it just as much as I remember. Brendan and Piper have my heart, and I cannot wait for the companion novel, which is Hook, Line, and Sinker, which is coming out, I think, March 1st? Sometime in March, and it can't come out soon enough. But for those of you that don't know, this is Grumpy Sunshine. It takes place in a small fishing town, and basically we have Piper, who is a socialite, and she takes it too far and pisses off her dad. So her dad sends her to the small fishing town and cuts her off basically and tells her she has to revamp this local bar. And when she's there, she bumps into this grumpy fisherman named Brendan, who keeps telling her she does not belong there, but they also have a little spark between them. This is definitely my comfort book. I didn't really understand what people meant when they said they had a comfort book until I read this one. Brendan and Piper have my heart. They just bring me so much comfort. I love the relationship so much. And there is amazing character development in here. The emotions are great. Like, I'm so attached to both of them. There's great spice. I just love the atmosphere of the small fishing town. I adore everything about this book. Then I read Pucked by Helena Hunting, and for the most part, I've enjoyed Helena Hunting books, except for one of them, which I really disliked. So I was a little hesitant, but I did have a good time with this one. It is the first book in a hockey romance series, and this one's really fun. It was brother's teammate romance, so obviously it was like a forbidden romance, but I had a great time with it. Also, the love interest is supposed to be like this player, so you have that element as well, and because he plays in the NHL, there is some like media things that go along with their relationship that they have to be careful of. And I don't know if I'm explaining that well at all. Basically, it's a hockey romance. That's all you really need to know. It's a spicy hockey romance, and I had a good time reading it. I feel like there were certain word choices that I didn't enjoy too much, but overall, it was pretty funny, and I had a pretty good time reading it. I did feel like the beginning progressed really fast, and I wasn't really a fan of that, but the pacing of the rest of the book was pretty good, so it does improve after a little bit. I also really enjoyed the side characters, and I think some of them get their own book, so Fingers crossed I loved those books as well. Some parts of this book did feel a little immature and gave me like secondhand embarrassment, so I gave this book 3.5 stars. You could probably tell I'm conflicted about how I feel about Pucked. Then I finally went and read Ricochet by Krista and Becca Ritchie, which is the second book in the Addicted series. And I loved this. This is really tiny, so it was definitely a quick read. And I can't tell you too much about it because I don't want to spoil Addicted to You. I don't know why they're all blurring in my head. Obviously, it's a sequel to Addicted to You, so I don't want to spoil anything, but I did enjoy this. I ended up giving this, I think, 4 stars or 4.5 stars because I really liked it, but I wanted to see more of some other characters, and I missed that element. But this is such an interesting series because I feel like it focuses so much on addiction. I've never read any book like this before, and it really makes you think. It really makes you feel for Lily and Lo and what they're going through. I don't know. It's just so heartfelt and heartbreaking, and you really go on this roller coaster with these characters. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what else to say. It's very emotional, very powerful, and just watching them battle their addictions. I can't describe the feeling I get from this series. I just feel like it's very important, and I'm really glad that I own the whole series and I will get to follow them on their journey. Then I wanted to try to read another fantasy, so I ended up reading King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. Obviously, it's a fantasy romance, but I still think it counts. Basically, all you need to know, it's enemies to lovers, there's an arranged marriage, and this includes vampires. So this is like the first vampire book that I've really read since Twilight. I mean, I guess I've also read Crave, but I don't know. I haven't read too many, so I'm always just a little bit hesitant because I feel like I was obsessed with vampires as a kid, but I kind of grew out of it, so I didn't know how I would feel, but I had a great time reading this book. The world building in this book is so interesting. I feel like I still haven't learned everything I need to learn, but it is just such an intricate world, and I love seeing how vampires interact with mortals and just the whole like politics part of this. And I don't know, there's just a lot of really interesting world building, which I loved because I thought this would just be romance and smut and not a lot of plot, but there definitely is still a lot of plot that draws you in. And I loved the romance between our main characters. The entire like arranged marriage plot line was so well done, and the relationship is pretty hot and cold, which was a little frustrating, but I'm hoping that it's a little bit more consistent in the sequel. I'm super excited to read it, but I had a great time with this. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Then I ended up reading another arc, which was Out of His League by Caroline Richardson. Now, this book is coming out on April 5th, and it was originally on Wattpad, so maybe some of you have already read it, but typically I enjoy Wattpad books, but this was not one of them. I could definitely tell it was a Wattpad novel, and I don't know how to word it right. I don't know. It felt like Wattpad, but not in a good way. I grew up reading a ton of stuff on Wattpad, and I love those books. So I don't know if I just outgrew Wattpad or what, but I did not enjoy this as much as I thought I was going to. I gave it 2 stars. Basically, this is a baseball romance. It has like a meet cute. It definitely has insta-love or insta-lust, depending on what you think about their relationship. But basically, our main character bumps into her favorite baseball player at an airport, buys him a coffee, and they kind of connect from that point on. That's really how they get started. It definitely is insta-love, insta-lust. Like, they kind of start touching each other within the first few minutes of knowing each other. Not in, like, a sexual way, but still, it's, like, a lot for just meeting somebody. And it moves very, very fast. I did not enjoy that part at all. Insta-love is my least favorite trope, so that already was not off to a good start. This is also filled with the miscommunication trope, which is another one of my least favorite tropes. Like, those 2 are my bottom 2 tropes. So it could just be a personal preference, but I absolutely hated all those elements that included those tropes. So considering that was most of the book, didn't really enjoy it. It is filled with a lot of spice, and it is a very short, fast-paced read. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, definitely give it a chance. I'm not saying it was like a poorly written book. It just had a ton of tropes I dislike. I did really like all the baseball elements though, so that's why I gave it 2 stars instead of 1. There were a couple things I liked, but for the most part, not really. But then, to get me out of that reading slump, I reread Wait For It by Mariana Zapata. You guys probably know by now, I am a sucker for Mariana Zapata books, especially because she is the queen of slow burns, which is my favorite romance trope. And Wait For It was one of the first ones I read, and I don't own it, sadly, so I couldn't reread like a physical copy, but I had a great time reading it on my Kindle again. It is just so cute because we have Diana, who is the guardian of her 2 nephews, and the love interest is the coach of the baseball team one of her nephews is on, and also her neighbor. So it's really cute. You get to see Diana basically be a single mom, and just the whole dynamic. There's like such a cute little family in there, and it warms my heart. I love them so much. This romance is just so sweet. I'm absolutely obsessed with watching them become a family, and the little baseball elements are fun. I don't know. It's just so cute. And I need to make sure I own this at some point because I have a couple other Mariana Zapata books, but this one I keep going back to. So one day, hopefully, I'll own it. Oh, a 5-star read, obviously. Then I decided to read Lore Olympus Volume 1 by Rachel Smythe, and this is a graphic novel. It is about Greek mythology, specifically Hades and Persephone, although you do see a lot of other Greek gods and goddesses in here, and I love it. This was originally a webtoon, and I remember reading it on there. I did not end up reading the entire thing because there was a lot of it. I don't even know if it's completed at this point. I'm not sure. But I did basically read this entire portion, but I had to buy it. Like, just this cover alone, stunning. If you just look, I don't know if you can, there's not a good way for me to do this, but just like look at some of these pictures. I don't know why this is so hard for me. There we go. Just like some of these illustrations, beautiful. So I had to get my hands on this. I basically reread the story, but it's a different experience with the graphic novel format. I loved it. I already pre-ordered volume 2. I cannot wait. Although definitely check the content warnings. I think there's even a page at the beginning that has the content warnings. Yes, it does. So definitely be aware of those because it does cover some darker themes as well. But I loved this so much. The illustrations alone are worth 5 stars, but I love Greek mythology, especially Hades and Persephone, so 5 stars. Then I couldn't help myself, and I had to read Addicted for Now by Krista and Becca Ritchie, which is book 3 in the Addicted series. And this one honestly took me a while to get through. It's a thicker one. It's at least twice as big as Ricochet. And this one took me a while because Lily and Lo are still struggling with their addiction in this book. And again, it's emotional, it's powerful, it is heart-wrenching. Like, they go through a ton of stuff in this book. And you can see the tabs. Blue tabs are like all of the emotional parts. So there's a lot of those. And it just took me a while to get through because I wasn't in a very good place mentally. I was, for some reason, just like a little depressed and having a hard time with my own emotions. So I had to make sure I was taking breaks from this world because if I couldn't deal with my own emotions, I couldn't really process Lily and Lo's emotions and mental health either. So this one took me a while to get through, but once I was able to be in a better place and dive back in, I really enjoyed this, and I gave this one 4 stars. I also just really loved it because I feel like we know Lily and Lo very well at this point, but this book especially, you really get to know Rose, Connor, Reich, and Daisy, and it makes me so much more excited to dive into Kiss the Sky and Hot House Flower, which are the next two I get to read, and I'm so excited. It'll be nice to be in the same world with the same core 6, but focus on a different couple. I'm really excited to see how the dynamic changes, and I probably can't help myself. I'll probably read it in February, let's be honest. And then one of the books on my TBR for this month was A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir, but it has been so long since I read An Ember in the Ashes. I read it in August of 2020, so I needed to reread that first. And for this, I listened to the audiobook for a good chunk of it, read the physical copy for the other chunk of it. I was all over the place with this book, but I did reread it. I gave this 4 stars as well. I love this series. I forgot how much I adored this world. I am currently in the middle of A Torch Against the Night, and I'm also having a great time. It's very intense, definitely brutal, and they all are dealing with like questions of loyalty and grief and wanting their freedom for different reasons. And if you don't know what the series is about, I know it was very popular on Book Talk a few years ago, but I don't, or not Book Talk, very popular on BookTube a few years ago, but I don't know if you all know what it's about. Basically, Laya is a slave, Elias is a soldier, and under the Marshall Empire, Defiance is met with death, and one day these people from the Empire come to Laya's home with her grandparents and her brother, and they arrest her brother, and she has nobody else, so she needs to meet with the rebel group to ask them for help to save her brother. And they said that they would help release her brother if she goes into this military academy to spy on the Marshall Empire for them. So she pretends to be a slave to sneak into the academy, and there she meets Elias, who is the Academy's best soldier, but also secretly their most unwilling. And they both have a lot that's going on and a lot they have to fight for. Also, fun fact, when I started rereading this, I realized that, here, I think I skipped it. I realized that this book has 2 maps in it. So here's like the entire kingdom, that's the whole empire. And then in the back, we have the map of Blackcliff Academy, which is so cool. I didn't even really look at that while I was reading, but maybe I will. But like I said, I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed the world building. It's definitely really brutal, but I loved being back in a fantasy world. I forgot how much I cared about these characters, and there are 3 more books in the series, technically 2.5 because I'm already halfway through A Torch Against the Night, but I am very curious to see what I think about it. I only own the second one, so I'll have to wait and get the 3rd and 4th from the library, but I'm really excited to finally be invested in a series people have been talking about for a long time. I've heard amazing things about Sabaa Tahir, and I can see why. So, like I said, I'm really loving A Torch Against the Night. I am not done with it yet, but I will probably be giving it 4 or 5 stars. That seems to be where I'm at with her books. But yeah, those are all of the books I've read in January, and if you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and if you do subscribe, please click the notification bell so you know when I upload next. Thank you guys so much for watching. I can't wait to see you in my next video.